Caution. The AJ and Quill show contains D&D content and is intended for a D&D audience. And, besides that, they're really weird. Hi everyone, welcome to Total Party Quill. I'm your friendly neighborhood tiefling, AJ, and this is my fearless companion, Quill the Dragon.
Greetings, puny humans.
Recently, Wizards of the Coast announced that they'll be putting out a new adventure in September called Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. And to help get everybody ready for that adventure, we're going to be doing a series of videos talking about monster tactics for creatures we're pretty sure you're going to encounter inside that adventure. And towards the official release, we'll be doing two of the most interesting monsters we can think of that could be in the encounter, namely an adult white dragon,
Ooh.
and the Tarrasque. In a recent Twitter post, Chris Perkins gave information about a magic item that would allow you to summon the Tarrasque that should appear in this adventure. So we figured why not cover that as well.
But what are we covering today?
Today we're going to be exploring the Yeti, a very common ape-like creature that you'll encounter more than likely in Icewind Dale during this adventure. They're well known throughout the whole region, and the first book in the Dritz series, The Crystal Shard, opens with Dritz fighting a Yeti. So we figure they're probably an important creature to cover. But let's not waste any more time. You got questions, we got answers. Let's get doubt fiery.
A face, oh god. This Hillard, the water's boiling. This Hillard.
Oh, hello!
Ugh.
Oh, I'm sorry to frighten you, dear. I must look like a Yeti in this getup. And what a great segue into our creature, the Yeti.
A Yeti is a CR3 large monstrosity that can be found on page 305 and 306 of the 5th edition Monster Manual.
Yeti have an AC of 12, 60-10 hit points, and have both a walking and climbing speed of 40 feet. Yeti have proficiency in both the stealth skill and the perception skill, which would hint to their nature as being Arctic hunters.
Yeti have immunity to cold damage, as well as dark vision out to 60 feet. They also have their own language, which is simply titled Yeti.
For abilities, Yeti have the keen smell ability and snow camouflage, as you would expect for their coloring and where they live.
For attacks, a Yeti has a claw and a chilling gaze attack. They can also do both as a multi-attack.
And that's a very quick breakdown, but let's try to get into the lore a little bit. It'll help explain why these stats.
Yeti are hulking carnivorous apes that stalk the frozen tundra.
And their skills in perception and stealth would indicate that they're more than likely ambush predators inside this Arctic biome.
Yeti are said to be able to smell the flesh of a living creature from miles away, much like a shark with blood.
And it even says that they can smell this in the middle of a blizzard. Now, an adult Yeti is about 8 feet tall, making it a large creature. And they're covered in a dense, thick white fur. The lore says that Yeti have both wide hands and feet, which helps with dispersing their weight when they're traveling across snow. Now, this is interesting because in the actual art shown here, Yeti are standing upright. But most of the time, they're actually on all fours, and they walk around like giant apes do.
Yeti are, however, quite comfortable fighting completely erect.
Yeti are described as very muscular, and it says they don't actually have the layer of body fat that most typical Arctic animals would have, like a whale or a walrus.
They're ripped. They walk around basically like Joe Manganiello, covered in white fur.
Now, instead of a protective layer of blubber, what a Yeti has is a special property inside of its fur. Besides allowing them to perfectly camouflage inside their snowy environment, Yeti fur has a supernatural insulating property where it absorbs the surrounding heat and transfers it to the Yeti to keep them warm.
In past editions, simply touching the fur of a living Yeti would cause cold damage.
Right, touching Yeti fur should basically feel like plunging your hand into frozen water, and it deals cold damage. You can see this expressed in the Yeti's claw attack, which also deals additional cold damage. It's to kind of represent the fur absorbing the heat as the Yeti strikes you with its fist or its claws.
In 2nd edition, the lore says that a Yeti's preferred method of killing a humanoid creature was to grab it and literally crush it against its body in a massive hug. The creature would be both crushed and frozen as it came into contact with the Yeti's fur.
And it's this property inside the fur that gives the Yeti its fear of fire. The heat-absorbing property of this fur absorbs heat really, really quick. And when Yetis get too close to big heat sources like flames or fire attack spells, they know from experience that it could actually make them sick. Now, this isn't strong enough to give them an actual vulnerability, but instead of vulnerability, they give them this ability inside their stat block. Whenever a Yeti takes fire damage, it suffers, similar to a fear effect, disadvantage on all its attack rolls until its next turn.
A Yeti that is exposed to too much heat can develop a fever, making them sick, eventually falling unconscious. And if it continues too much, they will eventually die.
Right, and this factoid, kind of coupled with a Yeti's dark vision and its ambush tactics, would kind of indicate that Yetis are more active either at night or during heavily overcast snowstorms where they can hide and they're out of direct sunlight. Now, something to note is that this property of the fur stopped after the Yeti perished.
Although Yeti fur was still quite valuable in frozen regions, it was quite insulating and provided ample camouflage in the natural environment. Yeti pelts could fetch a price of 300 gold pieces when sold. The Yeti lore also says that they have a secondary transparent eyelid.
And this helps them to see in blizzards or keeps their eyes from getting frozen when in these really cold environments. And speaking of eyes, Yeti also have a chilling gaze attack.
Gazing into a Yeti's eyes is said to induce an unnatural sense of horror.
And this mind-chilling sensation caused its victim to become both literally and figuratively frozen with terror.
It is said to make your blood feel like ice water running through your veins.
And classically, creatures that were immune to fear were completely immune to this ability to start with, but no longer in 5th edition. Now let's put all of this together. How do Yetis behave in combat?
Your typical Yeti. Let's call him George.
Dude, what a cute little bunny rabbit. Just what I always wanted, my own little bunny rabbit.
What's going on? I didn't agree to this.
I will name him George, and I will hug him and squeeze him and love him.
What's going on? Stop that. I'm not a bunny rabbit. Where do these ears come from?
And pat him and pet him.
I'm not a bunny rabbit. What was that?
Oh, that was a bit from an old Bugs Bunny cartoon that I saw when I was a kid.
Terrific. Anyway, Yeti have high strength and constitution, but a much more middling dexterity.
And we will classify Yetis as a melee tank. These brutes get into combat, they start hitting things with their melee attacks and their abilities, and they don't really move around all that much. But how the Yeti gets into combat is worth looking at. Based on their abilities and what we can understand from the lore, Yeti come across as ambush predators. We draw this from their snow camouflage, their keen sight, and their proficiency inside perception and stealth.
The 2nd edition monster manual also says that a Yeti's favorite tactic was to be stalking its prey and get ahead of them and bury themselves in the snow or a small depression, waiting for the creatures to approach them. Then they would burst from the snow and attack.
And this happened because originally the Yeti's gaze ability only worked on surprised creatures. But we can use this to translate their behavior across into 5th edition. So a Yeti's going to find some way to lay an ambush for whatever creatures it's stalking.
Note, if you happened upon a Yeti that was simply eating, this wouldn't apply.
And when creatures get within 30 feet of a Yeti, it will burst forth from this snow cocoon and surprise them. Now, being an ambush predator, Yetis are going to be pretty picky about what creature they go after. They also have an intelligence that's pretty close to a dumb human, and their wisdom is actually a little bit above, so they know how to pick and choose their targets within reason.
Ambush predators like to target the old, the young, the sick or injured, and the stupid.
And by stupid, we mean somebody who's doing something completely ridiculous and foolish, or somebody else who's completely unaware of their surroundings. So when these targets get to that 30-foot range, they burst forth and charges into the creatures, engaging in melee combat.
Hopefully, because of this tactic, they will also receive an unseen attacker advantage on their first attack.
Right, but only on the first attack, because once you've been attacked, you're pretty aware that you're being attacked. I would also say with its stealth ability, any creature with a passive perception of 14 or lower suffers a surprise round. It's not that they see it, it's that the creatures that have more perception just wouldn't be surprised by the Yeti coming out of the snow like that. And we're basing this on their stealth ability.
After using its claw attack on its first round, a Yeti will use its Chilling Gaze attack. It is a DC 13 Constitution save. Not too hard, but failing it is devastating.
Creatures that fail this Constitution save will suffer cold damage as well as the paralysis effect. Wait a sec, that's right, not everybody knows what paralysis actually entails inside Dungeons & Dragons. So let's get a little meta-adjacent and explain what that means for everybody.
Yes, the paralyzed condition. Now, a paralyzed creature is incapacitated and cannot move nor speak. Now, an incapacitated creature cannot take actions nor reactions. A creature that is paralyzed also fails all strength and dexterity saving throws. Attack rolls against this paralyzed creature are made with advantage. And any attack that hits a paralyzed creature, if it was made within 5 feet of it, is considered a critical hit.
Now, once they're paralyzed, the Yeti will also finish its multi-attack and use its last claw attack against this creature. Now, Yeti continues this multi-attack pattern on all the creatures for the rest of the combat. However, in subsequent turns, it would use its Chilling Gaze first, so that it can capitalize on the benefits if the paralysis takes effect. The only reason it didn't on its first round of combat is if it had advantage from being an unseen attacker. And if it didn't get that advantage, or somehow the DM ruled that that advantage wasn't there, then it would simply do its gaze attack first and then its 2 claw attacks.
Now the interesting part is if the paralysis takes effect. If the creature fails its Constitution save for Chilling Gaze on the next turn, the Yeti will simply pick up the creature and run away with its food.
A Yeti is an ambush predator. The only reason it's hunting creatures is for food. Once the creature is paralyzed, it can simply pick it up using its free object interaction, then uses the dash action to leave combat and try to get as far away from the other attackers as it can.
A Yeti will try to get a few 100 feet away and hide so that it can finish its meal in peace.
Exactly. A creature that is hunting for food, once it has food, isn't going to stick around and fight some more. It's going to take its food and leave. Now, based on its strength, a Yeti can pick up a paralyzed creature up to 270 pounds. Anything heavier than that, and its speed will be reduced. And the Yeti's going to know if it's too heavy to run away with pretty quick. As a DM for a Yeti encounter, you should keep track of how heavy each of your player characters is. Just make a note somewhere. Now, a Yeti is a living creature. It eats and it can die, and as such, will have a morale failure. We assume that once a creature reaches 1/4 of its total hit points, it will suffer a morale failure and try to leave combat to preserve its life.
For a Yeti, this threshold is approximately at 13 hit points. Once it reaches 13 hit points, the Yeti will leave combat, dashing away and running for its life.
Now we say dash simply because it hasn't been trained on how to disengage properly. And you should note that a Yeti in melee combat, which it probably will be, being a big brute like that, will suffer any of the attacks of opportunity that could happen from leaving melee combat. And as an added note, I would say that any Yeti that's by itself, that's outnumbered, or a Yeti that suffers fire damage in its combat would have a morale failure much higher. I'd say at 50% of its health, it would run away if it's facing fire or greater numbers.
So that's at approximately when the Yeti has 25 hit points remaining.
And that still counts for its natural fear of fire. And that's basically all of it. The Yeti's going to continue its multi-attack until it either paralyzes or kills the target, and once it does, it's going to pick them up and run away.
An abominable Yeti is a much larger version of this creature.
Right, abominable Yetis are 3 times the size of a human, and they have strength comparable with a lot of giants.
Despite being much stronger and tougher, you would treat an abominable Yeti much the same way. Their tactics and abilities don't alter all that much.
The only difference is that abominable Yetis, aside from their strength and size, have 1 additional ability.
They have a cold breath ability, much like a white dragon, that would recharge on a roll of 6 on a d6.
Now, it's a little metagamey, but that means that odds are it'll only get one chance to use this ability during a combat encounter. Now, its cold breath ability is a 30-foot cone of cold that it expels from its mouth. And if you check on page 249 of the DMG, you can see the targets in area effect table. We use this to judge how many creatures need to be in that area of effect for the creature to actually value using that ability.
This means that for its cold breath ability, a Yeti will want at least 3 opponents inside the area of effect to bother using it.
Now, Yeti won't intentionally include its main target inside this area of effect. It's going to use that much more for creatures that are interfering with its meal.
Although if the main target happens to be in the area of effect, oh well.
And we think it's going to use this cold breath ability as soon as it can.
Otherwise, you treat this combat encounter with an abominable Yeti the same as a regular Yeti.
And something else to keep in mind if you happen to be encountering abominable Yetis with regular Yetis, after you save from the chilling gaze of a regular Yeti, you are immune to the chilling gaze of other Yetis. But you are not immune to the chilling gaze of an abominable Yeti. And this would work vice versa. Now, some additional ideas is that a Yeti has about a little below average human intelligence and a fairly good wisdom. It said that they can use tools and weapons. And this includes man-made weapons, although it does say that Yeti won't fashion their own weapons.
This means for flavor, you can give a Yeti a rock throw ability much like a regular ape.
Another idea is that Yeti don't actually have proficiency in the athletics skill for grappling, but according to the Dungeon Master's Guide, you could give them proficiency in this skill without raising their CR at all.
A Yeti proficient in athletics would have a strength athletics bonus of +6.
And to follow both flavor and lore for these creatures, I have no problem with the idea of a Yeti using a grapple check in combat in place of one of its claw attacks to grapple the target and get them inside that crushing bear hug.
If a Yeti grapples a target, you can simply reflavor its claw attack as a chilling squeeze attack, and just change the slashing damage to bludgeoning damage.
Since the claw attack already includes cold damage, you would just say that was from being so close to the Yeti fur and crushed against its skin. And that's it. We hope this is enough to get you started using Yeti and Abominable Yeti inside your own campaigns and for the upcoming adventure Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. And we'd like to offer our most humblest apologies to the fantastic Mr. Will Friedel. We're sorry, bud, we wanted to get you on the air, we just ran out of time. But now, here's Quill's Joke of the Day. Quill?
What do you call a Yeti with a 6-pack?
I don't know. What do you call a Yeti with a 6-pack?
An abdominal Yeti.
Anyway, don't forget to tune in next week when our special guests will be Lauren Urban and Jen Critchmer from the hit web series D&D Beyond Heroes.
Absolutely wonderful women.
Terrific people. All right, we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.